Hi. Okay, chapter 9 is the chapter that deals with relationships and the dynamic of relationships. This is a big chapter and it's a huge concept. The PowerPoint is actually split into 3 different sections. I'm going to try to group some of those. Undoubtedly, this lecture will go a little bit longer, and I think I'll make other aspects of the learning unit a little bit lighter because of this. All right, so let's dive in. So first, the chapter talks about why we form relationships, and there are a number of different reasons. The first of which is appearance. Appearance exerts the greatest influence at the beginning of the relationship, and then it becomes less significant as the relationship strengthens on its own merit. We tend to be attracted to people who are beautiful, who we define that way, who have qualities that we admire. We also tend to be attracted to people that are somewhat like us in some way. Similarity is the idea that birds of a feather flock together. We like people who we have things in common with, and so whether it's similar educational status, economic status, different values, we're both Buddhists, we're both vegetarians, things like that. Complementarity is another issue. This is the opposite of similarity. This is when you are attracted by opposites, and certainly differences can attract. And although it's not quite as influential as the notion of similarity. Reward. Social exchange theory is like when you're going to the store and you want to buy, say for example, a large purchase. You're looking to purchase a snowboard, and so you're looking at the price tag, and it's a big price tag, and then you look at your bank account, you look at your credit card limit, and you basically decide whether or not the costs are worth the benefits. That's called social exchange theory. And so sometimes we do that in our relationships. And oh gosh, she's really awesome, she's gorgeous, she makes me feel great, she's got a kid, am I ready for that? And so it's cost benefit. Rewards is the idea of what do we get out of it and what do we anticipate, and analyzing that. Competency is when we're attracted to somebody because they have a great skill set, and we sort of hope that osmosis will occur, that gosh, if I really hang out with you, you're so athletic or so whatever, that maybe that'll help me in my pursuit of that. Proximity. This is a really interesting phenomenon. If you think of your neighborhood at home, undoubtedly you probably know the people across the hall from you in the apartment, across the street from you in the neighborhood, to the left and to the right. But the person who lives down the block and over 1 or 2, 3 houses, you're less likely to know. Think of a classroom. You know the people in front, behind, and to the left and to the right. That's all proximity at work. Disclosure is the idea that we tend to like people who self-disclose and tell us about things, about themselves, but it's important that it be somewhat equal and definitely appropriate self-disclosure, and that when you self-disclose to them, that you get something back. Nobody likes that feeling of being the first one to say I love you and not getting it back. Okay, so then the chapter continues and it talks about this notion of relational dynamics. This is important. This is where we get into some stages of development. One of the most influential and certainly well-known researchers of relational stages is Mark Knapp. And here you see this 10-step model. I like the notion of separating it, that this here is the stages of coming together, and this completely separate is the stages of coming apart. I don't like this stair-step thing where you go up and it implies that you automatically go down. But the stages are important to understand, and let's go through those in some detail. So the first stage is the initiating stage. This one lasts for about 5 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds. It's that eye contact. It's the decision to go ahead and interact. This is where those corny one-line, opening lines comes in, whatever your line is for people. Sometimes this is the most difficult stage for people. Experimenting, this is called data collection. And you ask information about the other person. So where do you live? Where are you from? How many classes are you taking? Probably a good one would be to know is, are you dating anybody? And it sort of allows for this notion of auditioning, where you're basically determining whether or not this person has some of the characteristics that you look for in a relationship. Oftentimes this is the means by which you discover similarity. So this is a lot depends on experimenting. Intensifying the relationship is basically becoming now a couple. You can have, by the way, very good friends, platonic friends, very tight friendships in an intensifying stage. It's not only for romantic relationships. And you'll notice that some of those differences discussed. Interacting, this is where social circles begin to merge. I know all of his friends, he knows all of my friends, so on and so forth. We have this notion of common property, and partners have different rituals and routines that go with their relationship, and certainly there's a sense of obligation. Bonding. Bonding is a symbolic public ceremony. It's the idea that you tell the whole world that the relationship exists and you're making that known. The most obvious one is a marriage ceremony. However, other bonds are possible. They're, interestingly enough, have not been proven to be as strong as a marriage bond. On the decline stage, these are the stages of coming apart. Differentiation, the first. This is where the one has sort of become two. And so it's a very stressful time and you're more focused on differences. Circumscribing, it's like, I don't even want to talk to you because I just know you're going to lose it. You're going to be a jerk. You're not going to respond. It's not even point. Like, there's no point in it. You're just going to have a fit, cry, go to your mom's, whatever. And so we make these judgments and we don't get involved. And so what we're doing is we're stopping and we're ceasing our interaction and the opportunity to deal with our problems. Stagnating, the relationship just exists and it's pretty empty. Stagnating can go on for years where it's just, I'll do my thing, you do your thing, whatever. And there's not a whole lot of interaction, but there you are. Avoiding, this stage is pretty much near the end, where you might have one person physically leave the apartment, the house. Sometimes there's totally avoidance, where I'm just going to avoid you emotionally. I'm going to avoid you physically. I'm not going to get involved. You do your thing, I'll do my thing, and be done with it. And so you just completely disassociate yourself emotionally, mentally, and everything. And it's very destructive for the relationship. The last stage is terminating. It's honestly really not a stage so much as a pronouncement. It's like publicly saying the relationship is over, we're done, kaput, the house is on the market, we're out of here. And so it's obviously a different stage altogether. Okay, third section of this chapter is different limits of some of those models, and there are some. Remember, those developmental models argue that we go in stages. And so the progression, the second point here, does always not flow in a predictable manner. And so there were some alternative models that were created as a result of this. Dialectic perspectives and relational dynamics are some of those alternative views to relationships rather than simply the stages. Dialectic tensions argues that there are things, for example, the notion of privacy and disclosure, you know, and having, how do you maintain that? Being an individual and being a couple, how do you balance that? Those are some of the dialectical tensions. Dialectical forces have to do with the things that come to bear. So here are some 3 different dialects that have to be balanced, okay? Integrated versus being separate. Having that connection versus being my own person. Being included versus being alone. Stability, change, and so on and so forth. These all continue. You can read them. Different strategies for maintaining some of these tensions. Different tensions have different influence on different relationships. Some people handle stability, you know, predictability, change, novelty, whatever. They're fine. They love a relationship that is predictable. They don't necessarily need spontaneity. They are happy campers. And somebody else is really affected by the lack of spontaneity in a relationship, by the lack of doing anything new, by the fact that it's so boring and it drives them crazy. So they're going to affect people different. These are some of the strategies that you can utilize for managing those. Okay, so let's go to the third PowerPoint. Okay. All right, third one. Section 4 is the relational messages. So this is how we communicate within a relationship and being able to handle that effectively. It's really important. One of the first things you have to understand is the difference between a content message and a relational message. A content message is what the message was about. The relational message is what the the message says about the relationship of the two people. If I say, Betty, can you bring some coffee into the boardroom? The content dimension is, Betty, bring coffee into the boardroom. And it's just what the words say. The relationship kind of implies that Betty, whoever she is a subordinate, because it's definitely a command that is being addressed. And so it gives you insight into the relationship. The other thing, in terms of relational, men tend to speak content and hear content. Women tend to be more subtle. They tend to disguise messages. It's 7 o'clock is not just a notation of the time. It might mean it's 7 o'clock, you were supposed to be here at 5, dinner's ruined, I'm upset, why didn't you call? It's like if somebody asks you, so what are you doing tomorrow? And you get that idea that they have an agenda, they want something, that's a hidden message. And so a lot of that comes into play with this whole discussion of content versus relational. Meta-communications, messages that refer to other messages. How to repair a relationship, really important stuff. Every relationship is going to hit a tough time. It's inevitable. It's part of the nature of relationships. So you have to be able to not avoid them, because you can't do that. You can't run away, nor can you pretend they don't exist. You have to be able to handle those moments of conflict and not ignore them. That means you have to face them, confront, you have to discuss, you have to disclose. The discussion of emotions comes into play. You have to be willing to express. Different types of relational transgressions as listed by your book: minor, significant, social, relational, deliberate, unintentional, one-time versus incremental. Where the transgression occurs, in that determines the response to it and how you choose to respond to it. In terms of repairing a relationship, perhaps you've gone through something, you've decided the relationship is worth fighting for, it's been damaged, but you want to give it a go. There are some things you can do to help repair the relationship, and your book lists those. What's really important is the whole I message. Don't say you make me feel, or you this or you that. That typically just triggers a defensive response on behalf of the other person. Instead, you want to be able to take ownership. You want to ask questions. You want to listen without being defensive. You want to try to acknowledge the emotion involved and learn how to apologize. For goodness sake, some people just do not know how to apologize effectively. It's being able to say you're sorry, to understand and recognize the damage that was done by whatever you did, and that you have a willingness to do whatever it takes to make it right. You do that, those things, that concept of a three-part apology, and many transgressions can be overcome. And then forgiveness. Easy on one side to talk about the person who apologized. What about the other person who has to forgive? And sometimes that's a harder element. And so your chapter closes on some discussion of forgiveness, which I really like this section in the textbook. I think it's important and something that many other chapters tend to omit. So there we have it. Huge chapter, ton of information, condensed. You might think 13 minutes for a lecture is long. I can't believe I got it all in. So anyways, I will see you online.